Let's go.
Let's go. Oh no.
Do you want to?
Sorry. I'll let you. Next.
I'm excited and I feel relaxed and I'm ready to party. Let's say sorry. You don't need to do that. You don't need to apologize. It's a fucked up female habit. You don't need to be sorry for anything ever.
Can you guess what every woman's worst nightmare is?
I don't have rage issues.
I have nothing to prove to you.
When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
I say when it comes to stardom and Lauren, there are no accidents.
Hi, Karen Peterson.
Bonjour et bienvenue à Citizen Dame. I just felt like starting in French today. I don't know why.
Aren't we fucking fancy?
Yes. I'm Karen Peterson, joined as always by Lauren Humphreys Brooks. Hello, Lauren.
Hello.
I actually was gonna say more, but then I started cracking myself up and I stopped. I was gonna say le podcast où nous parlons des films français et I don't know.
One of the things I love about French is that when you lose words or you can't remember words, you could just say because the French do it all the time anyways.
Exactly.
And then if you really don't know what you're saying, you just slur over all of the words as much as you can. And you're just like, I'm totally speaking actual French.
Oh man, the other day one of my friends sent me this thing. It said it was a video and it was just like, if you're ever in a situation where you just cannot think of a word, instead of saying like, oh no, I can't remember the word, just say, oh, how do you say that in English?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good
that's
one.
So smart.
I know. I have a friend who speaks Spanish. It's not her first language. It's her second language. She lived in Mexico for a while, and she will do that. She'll be like, "Oh, I don't know how to say this in English." Just like I think you just don't know what word you're looking for. Just because you're not Spanish.
Yeah, that's really funny. Although I did have a roommate in college whose grandmother was Italian, but they had lived in Portugal at one point too. So she spoke Italian as her first language and Portuguese as her second. And later in life, apparently she never really learned English. So it was kind of an interesting situation. They lived in Canada, and later she had a stroke and lost Italian. She lost her first language, but apparently when you learn a second language, it's stored in a different part of your brain. That part wasn't affected. So after the stroke, she couldn't speak Italian, but she could speak Portuguese.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. And so anyway, so this month we are talking Agnès Varda, the Queen. We have talked kind of about her. We've referenced her a lot on this podcast, but we've never actually dived into her filmography, and that's what we're going to be doing. We're starting with not her very first feature film, but the one that everybody knows when they talk about Agnès Varda, and that is Cléo from 5 to 7. And so that's where we're starting today. This film is from 1962, and it is, as the title kind of suggests, it is filmed in essentially real time. It's obviously fudged. It's not exactly, there are certain places you can't get to that quickly around Paris, but it's the idea of it, and it's an interesting experiment, I think. And Varda, she was actually Belgian, but her life and career were in France. And she was definitely one of the faces of the French New Wave, and very experimental throughout her career. She kind of did it all. She had dramas and romances. She had documentaries, short films. In the case of Cléo from 5 to 7, she has a short film that she directed, a short silent within her film. So she did a lot of those kinds of things. Just such an interesting career, and so we're excited to be taking a look at a lot of several of her films over the next couple of weeks. One of the one of the films I think that a lot of Americans know is actually one of her final films, which is Faces Places. We will be discussing that later in the month too, but that got her an Oscar nomination. She actually became when she was nominated, she became the oldest person nominated. Oh, no, no, sorry. This is when she got the honorary Oscar. She was the oldest person to receive the honorary Academy Award. And
Wow.
then yeah, and then was nominated for Faces Places. Oh, yes, she was the oldest person nominated at that point too. She was 8 days older than James Ivory, who was also nominated that year for Call Me by Your Name.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, overall, what sort of experience do you have with Agnès Varda?
Well, I think I said this last week. She for a very long time has been like a major gap in my cinematic knowledge, about which I'm quite embarrassed actually. Because she's, you know, one of the few female filmmakers working in the French New Wave. She was friends and colleagues with people like Godard and Truffaut, obviously Jacques Demy. And she's just like such an important figure, and yet somehow I just managed not to see most of her films, including until this year the film that we're talking about, which is like her you know, if you have, for the most part, I think that if you've seen a Varda film, you've either seen Cléo from 5 to 7 or you've seen Faces Places, one or the other. I actually haven't seen Faces Places.
Oh, it's so delightful.
So I'm really looking forward to it. And I actually, because weirdly enough, we decided to do this and I'd already watched Cléo from 5 to 7 earlier this year. So this week I was like, you know what, I'm going to watch a couple more of like, I've seen a few of her shorts actually. But I was like, I'm going to watch a couple more of like her longer feature length films, just to, you know, ones that I haven't seen, whatever. So I watched the Gleaners and I, which is a fantastic film. I loved it. And The Beaches of Agnès, which is sort of her sort of version of a autobiography, right? And both of them are really interesting films. I think The Gleaners and I is brilliant. I think it's a brilliant documentary. But one of the things that kept on coming back for me in watching her stuff, and in watching some of her other documentaries, I watched her Black Panthers documentary short. There's also one that's just like, it's actually a tourist film about beaches, about like the south of France. But one of the things that keeps on coming back, I think, in a lot of her films is this warmth. There's a warmth to her filmmaking, even when she's dealing with very difficult topics. And for someone who's known largely as a documentarian, when I think of Varda, I generally think of documentaries. You know, she has this warmth and love and understanding of humanity. She really wants to explore the human spirit, I think. And not in a naive way, and not in a way that is, you know, treating people like they're just subjects, but she has this warmth and closeness and love for people, and interest in other people that I think is honestly missing from a lot of other filmmakers from the same period. I think it's certainly missing from people like Godard, who has always, you know, come off as very aesthetically brilliant, but cold to me. Like more interested in the aesthetics of the image than in what the image is actually doing, like in the people that are actually contained within it. And one of the things I really like about Cléo from 5 to 7 is that it has that same kind of warmth. It's very recognizable in style. It's definitely Varda's own style, but it also does have all of those elements of the French New Wave. But she has this warmth and understanding and interest, not just in Cléo, but in everyone who surrounds her, including like the random people that pass her on the street. And it results in a film that feels, I think, very loving, that with another filmmaker it wouldn't have. Certainly not in that period.
Yeah. I think yes, it really does give so much character and attention to everybody who walks by, everybody who, you know, people sitting in a cafe having conversations, those kinds of things. And it also really feels like such a warm representation of Paris too, which is a city that is very lively. It's a lot of fun to go, but it can also feel very very sprawling and detached, and there's so many people and so much happening, and it's easy to kind of get lost in that. And I think that this is also a view of Paris that somehow makes it kind of feel like a small town. It's clearly a place that she loves.
Yeah.
So the film, like we said, it came out in 1962, and basically what it is, for anybody who has not seen it, Cléo, whose given name is Florence, played by Corinne Marchand, she's a singer, and she is waiting for some medical test results. She is waiting to find out if she has cancer. And so for these, hour and a half, it's an hour and a half movie. It's called From 5 to 7, but it's really from 5 to 6:30. And which I think is funny. But yeah, so it's her just basically trying. It's also, this takes place on June 21st, the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, which I don't think is an accident.
No.
Yeah. Like that's part of what is happening here, is like she's just, I mean, I think a lot of us can understand and feel that have had that experience of waiting for something like this, and you're waiting for that phone call that could change your life or just make everything the same, and you don't know what to expect. And so we're basically going through this with her in these 90 minutes, just, completely anxious, not able to just relax for 5 minutes and just sit, because everything around her is just too distracting, too what's the word in English?
Je ne sais quoi,
Yeah, but it's oh my gosh, I literally forgot the word that I'm looking for. Oh my gosh,
I don't know.
no, like everything just oh man, everything is just trying to, oh man, I don't know, it's gone, that word is gone. Anyway, yeah, too many distractions, she can't just relax. But she's constantly on the move, and so that's really what this whole film is, just her trying to find a way to just wait, but being unable to sit still, and until she finally, toward the end, she meets somebody who's able to kind of be this calming presence for her, but it takes a while for her to get there.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot. It's interesting to think about the way that the film plays with time, and these sections that feel very long but only take place over like a couple of minutes, right? And then other sections where it's just like we're walking around Paris, and it kind of, there's tension, but it sort of ebbs and flows. There are points where she does get a lot happier, she does get a lot more active, like when she goes to see her friend, and then goes to the cinema, right? There's like this moment, it's not necessarily a moment of distraction but relaxation. But then at the end of that, the mirror breaks, right? And it's like all of that fear and superstition, et cetera, comes back to her. And so it's an interesting way that the film deals with that kind of tension, because it isn't this like building up to the revelation or her going to see the doctor or whatever. It's more organic in a lot of ways. It's like tensing and then relaxing, tensing and then relaxing. Things feel longer and then shorter. And it's interesting the way that Varda is able to play with that, because there's a lot of scenes of walking and of driving just through Paris. And those are the points where everything feels a little bit more relaxed, of just like, going from point A to point B. It's like, okay, we can take a breath now.
Yeah. Overstimulating. That's the word I was looking for.
There you go.
I got there.
It's Paris. Paris is overstimulating. It really is. It's a great city, but it is overstimulating at times.
Yes. Especially when your hotel is right next to the train station.
Oh my God.
No relaxing. Yeah, anyway. So you mentioned this was the first time that you had, or not this exact time, but this year was the first time you had seen the film.
Mhm.
So what were some of your, like, just without talking about specifics, because of course we're gonna go into some of those, but what are some of the initial feelings, I guess, that you had watching this the first time?
Um, so I really liked it the first time. It's a film I think that you have to be in a particular mindset to really get into, which is true for a lot of French films of this period, because there are these points of, it's that kind of thing where everything happens but nothing happens. It really is following a woman through about an hour and a half of her life. And her meeting people and talking with people, getting into arguments with friends, and sort of her dealing with this fear that she has and this tension, and where it's going to go. I was wondering, actually, the first time that I watched it, I was like, why have I avoided watching this? Like, why did I? And I don't think that it's so much that I avoided it, it's that there was a certain point where I stopped being interested in French New Wave. And so up until that point, I'd like watched Godard and Truffaut and like a lot of those guys. And then just at some point, just like, I don't care anymore.
Well, if you watched a lot of good art, I can see why you stopped caring.
Well, so this is actually part of it, because there's that Gallic cool, right? That sort of attitude that is very much prevalent in the French New Wave, and then I think is there in this film, but that Varda in a lot of ways kind of breaks down. So you have this woman who is beautiful, and there's all of this emphasis on the aesthetics of her, the appearance of her. And what Varda does is to begin to deconstruct that in a certain sense of like, of her in over the process of this like hour and a half, Cléo actually beginning to understand herself as a subject rather than an object. Cléo, not even the world around her, but herself. And I think that that's something that is what is setting this film and Varda generally apart from some of her contemporaries. And I'm sorry, but she understands women as subjects.
What?
As subjects,
that's crazy.
as subjects within themselves too. So it's also about, because I think that this film in a lot of ways is not just about the external world imposing this objectification on women, but women objectifying themselves. And Cléo, who's this young singer, she's sort of a celebrity. She's not like, the impression that you get is that she's not this like massive celebrity, but she's known, right? People know her song, they recognize her, she's successful, etc.
Yeah.
And she is an object in a lot of ways, but she objectifies herself. She understands herself as an object. There are whole conversations at the beginning, like, or voiceover at the beginning, where she's thinking about how, she looks good in everything. Right. And as the film goes on, Cléo herself begins to understand herself as a subject. And that's what it's really about. And I think that it's really something that only a woman can make in a lot of ways, because you have to understand the experience of being both objectified by others, but also objectified by yourself.
Yeah. I first saw this in college. I took a French film class, the only film class I officially took. But we were introduced to all kinds of, the important filmmakers, I guess. And so Cléo from 5 to 7 was one that we watched. We watched a lot of Truffaut. We watched a couple of Godard films, some other things, I don't know. Anyway, but it's interesting watching this when I was, 22 or 23, without a lot of life experience. I understood the movie, I understood what it was saying, I understood what it was doing on a certain level, but it really does, as you get older, as you as you kind of experience life, the film itself really deepens and takes on some new meanings. And so watching it now 20 plus years later, it's in a lot of ways it feels like a different movie. It's funny because I was watching it and I completely forgot about the opening tarot scene, and
Mhm.
and that's such an interesting way to introduce this film. I mean, she's at a tarot reader, and it's going like it starts off in color, this overhead shot. You only see their hands and the cards, but you're hearing everything that they're talking about. And then it starts to shift into different perspectives. It starts to shift into black and white and goes kind of back and forth a little bit. And then eventually the rest of the film is all in this beautiful, crisp black and white photography. But I just think that this is such an interesting way to open a film like this, because of the way that it does like introduce this idea of shifting perspectives, and also how, I mean, this is a tarot reader who's possibly delivering bad news, but even she's talking about how there's lots of ways to interpret this. It doesn't necessarily mean you see this one particular card, it doesn't necessarily mean the worst thing. It can just mean, something as simple as this is just going to be change. And I like that that introduction into a film like this, which really is about shifting perspectives and learning to not just think that everything is going to be the absolute worst thing.
Yeah, it also like in watching this the second time, so I watched it first, I think back in January. And then in watching this the second time, I was like, oh, we're kind of getting an outline of the plot from the tarot reading, right? And I think the most prevalent one is like when it talks about, oh, you're going to meet a young man and he's a very talkative young man, right? and then you're like, Antoine, okay. But so it is this like emphasis, because the idea of superstition and fate comes back a number of times, and that kind of element is introduced right at the very beginning with the tarot reading, because Cleo is kind of she's looking for solace in a lot of ways. She's looking for reassurance, and she's not getting it, right? And one of the things with palm reading, tarot reading, etc., is that really it's not about reassurance. It's not even about predicting the future or the what is going to happen to you in the next couple of hours. It's about getting at your own fears and your own desires and things. That it's exposing something about the self versus about the wider reality, right, of the world. And I think that probably, and I'm certain that analysts have done this, to deconstruct the opening tarot reading and what it actually means to Cleo's psychology, and how she understands things, as well as how the kind of tarot reader is telling her certain things. Because that whole sequence ends with Cleo getting very upset, right, and then leaving, and the tarot reader like saying to like her husband or someone else, just like, she's gonna die, right? And of course, the film doesn't end with her death at all, but it is this like this kind of concept of this external fate, which the film sort of plays with and belies in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I do think one of the interesting elements about it, and it's always the question of like, predicting the future and tarot readings and fortune telling and all of that, is if Cleo had not gone to the tarot reader, would the film have played out in the same way? And like, would she have spent the next couple of hours doing what she did? How would she have reacted to it? And so of course the whole concept, of having your fortune told and telling the future affects the future itself, because it affects the way that you respond to things.
Right.
Well,
and I think that's very accurate, because I mean, we even find out later on that she's already been waiting for 2 days. Like, this is, this isn't the, like, basically, I think that that visit to the tarot reader kind of gave her this different, more heightened sense of urgency. She was already feeling anxious about it, obviously, for the last couple of days, but now that she's gotten this, and it's left her feeling more unsettled. And so yeah, and so then she ends up just kind of, I mean, who knows what she was doing before that reading, but like how she was spending her time, you kind of get the sense that she does wander around a lot and kill time a lot. But there's also there's moments where you can just see, where you can really see the toll that this waiting is taking on her. Like when she goes to a cafe and she puts money in the jukebox to play one of her songs, and she's walking through this, this like down the sidewalk past all these tables, and she's not walking with confidence. She's not walking, like she's kind of weaving. She's kind of, she looks unsteady, a little unsure of herself. And so you can just really see as these 90 minutes are going on, just all of her confidence really starting to erode as she just gets toward closer and closer to finding out her fate. But I think that the real erosion started with this reading that did not give her the assurance that she was looking for.
Yeah. Well, I really like that cafe scene because there's like a kineticism to it where she keeps on, so she puts the money in and then she walks out the door and she sort of walks down the street. Then she walks back and passes all these tables, and like you overhear snippets of conversation. Some like the people are talking about Algeria, they're talking about like all of these different things that are going on. She sits down, she orders a brandy, but before the brandy arrives, she gets up, she walks around. It is that like that nervousness, that like you were saying earlier, that overstimulation and distraction, that she can't sit still, she can't focus on anything. And the undercurrent of that is that she's worried, right? She's worried about what's going to happen, what the doctor is going to say. And the camera and the movement of the camera and the things that the camera picks up is very much mirroring that aspect of her life in that moment.
Yeah. I think it also really establishes how alone she is, because she's surrounded, like anybody, I've certainly felt this, and like when I've gone through depression and things, where you can be completely surrounded by people and yet you feel so alone because nobody understands what you're going through. And so in that particular scene, I really felt that, because she's, she's dealing with possibly the worst news of her life, or maybe everything's fine, but she doesn't know. And nobody around her has any idea. Nobody's paying any attention to her. It's her music that she's playing and nobody is reacting to it. It's such an isolating moment right there in the middle of so many people.
Yeah, and she struggles to connect to people. She talks to a lot of people. She has friends, she has colleagues, etc. But she struggles to connect to people throughout the film. And yeah, it does kind of mirror that experience of talking to people without actually talking to them, I guess, without actually having that emotional connection. But that changes as well. I think that there's kind of a cutoff point where she goes to see her friend, who's a model, and is like modeling for a sculpture class, right? And that's where we begin to see her having this more human connection that she didn't have with like the her assistant, or with the two men who show up to rehearse with her, right? And that we certainly don't see her having in the cafe. And so there's kind of a development going on of her entering the world more and connecting to people more and finding that humanity versus the separateness of her. One of the things that struck me in watching it this time was how much, particularly early in the film, how much Cleo is fragmented visually. There's a lot of use of mirrors, mirror images, windows, so a lot of glass, actually, windows, reflections, etc., where it's actually like in places it's literally dividing the screen up, but it's always via Cleo and her sort of fragment. And I do think, in kind of the simplest terms, it's about fragmentation of identity. and her not knowing what she is beyond these looks and images of herself. One of the most striking shots to me is fairly early on, where she's in the cafe with her assistant, she's having a coffee, and her assistant's like telling a story on one side, and then she's overhearing, and the audience is overhearing this couple having an argument on the other. And the frame is like bisected by a mirror. And it took me a moment to figure out who was being mirrored and who wasn't, because it looks almost like a split screen, right?
Yeah.
The way that it's set up. And what it actually is that there's a mirror behind Cleo, and then there's this couple sitting off to the side. But for the way that it's shot, the couple could almost be mirrored and be on the opposite side of the room. But it does emphasize that like fragmentation and separateness that you're talking about as well.
Yeah, there's so much of that. It's interesting how well she's able to capture that experience and really drive it home in such a short amount of time. I want to talk a little bit about the friends too, because I think that the people that do and do not help her out really matter. First of all, yeah, you have her assistant. She's spending a lot of time with in the beginning after she leaves the tarot reader. They go shopping. The assistant doesn't take this seriously. Doesn't seem to think there's anything to worry about. It's just kind of brushing off her concerns. Everything's going to be fine, and also like part of that is when they go hat shopping and she's just commenting on, oh, you can't have that hat, that's not a summer hat, that kind of thing. And so it's like everything that Cleo is trying to do, every choice that she's trying to make, or everything that she's just thinking about, her assistant Angèle has opinions about and is gonna basically tell her that she's wrong. It seems like everything that she's thinking or feeling is just not quite right according to this person, and then they go back to her apartment, and then these two, the composer and the lyricist, they show up to rehearse. One of them, by the way, I think it's the pianist, is Michel Legrand, who is the composer for the score of the film. He also did, he was a very well-known composer.
Yeah.
He did The Umbrellas of Cherbourg. He did the Thomas Crown Affair. He won an Academy Award for Yentl. So very, very well-known composer. Anyway, he appears in this as the pianist. And when the two guys show up at the house, Cleo is upstairs. The assistant is who greets them. And, oh yeah, she's worried about this. Oh, well, we'll make her feel better. We'll pretend to be the doctors, and like just none of these people are taking her seriously.
Yeah, there's a impression, I think, running throughout that she needs to be managed, I think. That's the attitude that a lot of them are taking to her, that, and that also her lover briefly shows up as well. And again, it's like there's a coldness, there's like a separation going on, that she's being dramatic, she has to be managed, she has to be controlled, what are you so worried about, all of that kind of thing. And by the end of the scene with the composer, with the pianist and the lyricist, like she's just like throws a fit at them, basically. She's upset, she's like, I can't do this, right? And they're like, oh, she's just being extreme, etc. There's a lot of negating of her emotions and of her experience as simply, her being silly, right?
Yeah.
And like you say, not being taken seriously.
Yeah. Well, she kind of has an outburst with them after she sings this really beautiful song, but it's a very sad song, and she kind of the emotions that it's conjuring in her as she's singing this, it's just that becomes kind of that straw breaking the camel's back, where she just realizes she cannot handle this, and this is just not the time. And so she kind of has a tantrum about it, and instead of the three of them realizing, wow, she's really dealing with something and we need to help her. They just kind of don't know what to do. And so because she knows that these are not the people that can help her right now, and she does, she leaves. So then we have that great cafe scene. She goes and sees her friend, and it's spending time with her friend who's a model who does acknowledge the seriousness of the situation. And I think that's where she's able to kind of not relax, but at least kind of calm down a little bit, because even though the friend is like, well, you know what, let's go have a laugh, it's not because she's saying, oh, just forget about your problems. It's, this will help you get through your problems. And I think it's that bit of being taken seriously and having someone who actually wants to help that actually starts to help.
Yeah, you get the impression that like they there's also a sense that they've known each other before she was famous, right? And so there's like a longer period of friendship, and there's just it's more emotionally attuned, and and her friend can't really say much. I think that one of the things that's running through this film a lot of the time is that there's nothing anyone can do, right? There's nothing that Cleo can do. There's nothing that any individual person can do to make things better, or to make her not have cancer, or to make the doctors speed up and call her, or anything like that. But there's a way of living that she hasn't like connected to. And I do think some of it goes back to that difference between objectification and subjectification. That she becomes more of a subject in her own story as the film goes on. And it's through connections. It's interesting that it's through initially that connection to this one other woman who's the same age as her, who's also in an objectifying profession. She's a model, right? And the scene where we meet her is all of these people, primarily men, standing around looking at her naked body, right? And sculpting her. And she even says like, oh, they don't even really know I'm there. I'm like, they don't see her as a person, is a naked woman standing there even. They see her as a thing that they are modeling, literally. And you've got this kind of that element, I think, of like the woman as object, but also the woman owning that objectification. And that's where Cleo begins to, let go a little bit. Let's talk about that insert. Let's talk about that insert scene though. The short
film
that which I think was made earlier than the actual film, or it was something that Varda had conceived of before she actually did the film, because it's got Godard and Anna Karina are the leads.
Yeah, how'd that happen? Yeah, so you have this so Cleo and her friend, they go to visit, what's the friend's name? Dorothy. They go to visit Dorothy's friend, who is a projectionist at a cinema. So he puts on this short film for them, and so basically it's a silent film. It's basically it's this man and this woman standing on a bridge in Paris, and they're happy and they're in love, and he waves her off, she leaves and goes down some stairs, and he puts on some sunglasses and then sees the woman that he loves get she trips on a hose.
She trips on a hose and then gets hit with like water and dies, and then like a hearse shows up. I don't know why
she dies, but she does. And then like everything just gets worse and worse. A hearse comes up to cart her off, and then he ends up taking off the sunglasses, these dark sunglasses, and realizing that everything he saw was wrong. She did fall, but she was fine, and an ambulance came, not a hearse, and they were able to live happily ever after.
Well, and I mean, there's a lot of symbolism there in terms of Cleo, but also one of the things that again struck me is, first of all, we've got Godard, who's famous for always wearing sunglasses. Like that was chic thing.
Mm,
But so we've got Godard, we've got Anna Karina, and we have these like two views that, you know, the death, right, the darkness, and then the light, the sort of more comic elements. And of course, this is like kind of playing into Cleo's own fears and confusion, but so much of it is about the way that it is looked at. But specifically, and this is where I think it gets more complicated, it's specifically about the way a man is looking at a woman.
yeah.
And that is what is shaping her, the woman in the story's fate. And we've got throughout the film Cleo being looked at a lot by both men and women, but there is a judgment and there's something about the male gaze that runs throughout the film that is very much related to this objectification. And I think part of what Varda is implying is that even the shaping of a woman's fate is based on the way that men are looking at her.
Yeah.
But there is this ability to take control, and this is what Cleo eventually does. There is an ability to take control of your own objectification and eventually become the subject of your story. And that's where, so you've got this short, and then that's Cleo and her friends are like laughing at it, and then they go, and then her and Dorothy leave. And that's when the mirror is broken and Cleo is like plunged back into this moment of fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So she's in a sense, she's putting on the dark glasses. But she's also still not subjectifying herself. She's still allowing this objectification element to come in.
Right. Yeah. Because she sees that mirror breaking as
Mhm.
you know, bad luck. It's bad. This is a bad sign. Obviously, things are going to be wrong. And
It's shattering the image of the self. Like
right.
that's what happens when a mirror breaks.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's also interesting because like just on a more like pulling out just on a larger level, it's also just such all these this movie is just made up of moments. It's like, you know, 3 minutes here, 5 minutes there. I think the longest stretch is like 15 minutes. But it is interesting because you have, you know, as we were just talking about a little bit ago, you know, that anxiety that she has about this thing, and then people just not being around to help her. Now she has this couple of minutes where she's pausing and she's able to kind of lose herself in this fun film that she's watching with her friend, and she kind of does feel better, and then immediately that is shattered as soon as she's kind of snapped back to reality. And that's such a relatable thing, you know. I mean, that's kind of that's what these experiences are. It's,
Yeah.
you know, you can kind of forget for a minute and then all of a sudden it's just, oh, you're faced with it again. And yeah, so, and that's what happens. But what I think is interesting is that the very next scene, or no, still part of that scene is, you know, they go out and there's, you know, they're passing this cafe and they find out that a man just got killed. And so Dorothy, the friend, she's like, oh, see, it wasn't about you. That mirror was not about you. That was about this guy. It's fine. It's fine.
We got the shattering of the mirror, the shattering of the window.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, you know, of course, that's not going to completely comfort somebody who thinks that they might have cancer. So, yeah. So she decides to spend the rest of the afternoon in this nearby park. It's a beautiful day. And she goes to this park. And that is when she meets Antoine, who is a soldier who is on leave. It's his last day of leave. He has to go back to the Algerian War, which was the Algerian War for Independence. A little bit odd of the timing here because that war, I believe, ended in the spring. It was already over by this time, but that's okay. But yeah, so what are your thoughts about Antoine?
I love that sequence because I do think that that's where, you know, Cleo comes into herself, that whole like idea of subjectification. And it's through initially this kind of annoying man who, you know, basically is trying to pick her up, but basically like trying to talk to her. And she even says to him at
Young
one
man who
point,
talks a lot.
yeah, but she says to him at one point, like, oh, usually when men do this, I don't respond. So I just wasn't even thinking, like, because she responds to him, right? And they get into this conversation, and they actually very clearly talk about the similarity of their positions, that he's about to go back to war. He doesn't know if he's going to survive. And she is waiting for, information from a doctor about whether or not she has potentially something that could kill her, but also potentially something that wouldn't kill her, right? And so they're both kind of in this space together, and that's something that he explicitly like taps into. And that's when, in having this conversation with someone who understands her experience, even if in a fleeting way, that's where she begins to understand her own experience. And it's also where the film starts to calm down. And like Cleo calms down, the film calms down. It becomes much more like there's still movement, but there's more focus on kind of the calmness of the park, and that they go and get on a bus because he says, oh, I'll go with you to the hospital, you can see your doctor, and then you could come with me and see me off at the train. And they're joking, they're talking about their past, their childhood. We find out that her name isn't even Cleo.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like this development of the season as well, the summer that is around them, the sensation of just like, life continuing on, and it's what kind of calms her and relaxes her and allows her to not to like I think that so much of this is about like her finding a distraction, but this stops distracting her. She's not distracted from her fears anymore. She is dealing with them. And she's understanding them as part of something broader beyond like just the momentary tension.
Yeah. So similar to Dorothy, Antoine takes this seriously, and that validates her feelings, which is really important. He goes a step further though. Dorothy's like, let's distract you. And Antoine's like, why don't you do something about this? Why are you waiting for this phone call? Which, by the way, she leaves her apartment while she's waiting for a phone call. But you're waiting for this news. Why don't you just go get the results? Let's take some action. And that's really what she needs. She needs to be able to kind of take some ownership and just confront it rather than just waiting for this bad news. And I think that there's so much power in that for her. And it also kind of gives him something to do to distract himself from the fact he has to go get on a train and go back to the war, And so it's such a lovely moment of two people who probably the only two people in the city that can really understand each other right now. And at least for their perspectives, and they just happen to find each other in this really beautiful setting. And yeah, I mean, there's all these studies about how calming water is. So the fact that they meet at a waterfall just feels really, really poignant and really important. And then they take action, but they're still enjoying their time together, enjoying their conversation on their way to this hospital, and just learning a lot about each other. I think it's funny because there's one part where she says something like, you're always asking questions, I'm always learning something from you. I'm like, girl, it's been 5 minutes. Like, you literally just met. That's gonna stop at some point. But I really do. I like their conversation. I like I like how free flowing and easy it feels for both of them. It's just, there's just that sense when you do meet somebody like that, it's just, it really can just calm you so much, no matter what's going on.
Yeah.
And then they get to the hospital and the doctor's gone.
I just want to go back really quickly because you talked about like her taking ownership and this, like, taking action, right?
Yeah.
And it's also about her taking ownership of her body, because this is something that's happening to her, right?
Right.
If she has cancer, it is in her. It's in her. It's a part of her body. And yet she's like having to relate to all of these other people who are looking at her and controlling her body, including a doctor who has information about what is going on with her body that she does not have, right?
Yeah.
And that she, in a lot of ways, she's afraid to have as well. And so you get to like, okay, she is taking control, like that again, subjectification, taking control of herself and her physical being, basically. And then they get to the hospital and the doctor's gone, and that's one of those just like, the medical profession is the same the world over. France in 1962, America in 2025. Oh, the doctor was supposed to call me. Oh yeah, he went home already.
Yeah.
It's like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's so frustrating because it's like, and it's frustrating for us as the audience too, because it's like, this is the moment we've been waiting for. We're going to find out. And nope, he's gone. And, this is obviously something that's important to her, and it's not that we don't know if it's important to the doctor or not, but it's obviously not his priority because he didn't make that phone call. And so it's another way of just kind of giving her perspective of kind of where she stands with other people, that the doctor could just go home for the day and he'll deal with her situation tomorrow, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Well, and then they do run into the doctor as he's leaving.
They do.
As he's driving out. Well, and again, this whole thing has been built up, and this has been kind of the thing that's lingering in the background for the entire film. And then he doesn't even tell her that she has cancer. He says like, oh, well, a couple of months of radiation and I'll set it right.
Yeah.
And that's the way he tells her.
Yeah.
Right. And then he drives off, and you get this moment of like her and Anton just kind of standing there being like, what the fuck?
Right.
like, oh my God, and it's interesting because in some ways it kind of diminishes the concern. It's just like all of this fear and all of this buildup. It's like, oh, whatever. Okay. Everything's going to be fine. And it's just like, well, she doesn't know that everything's going to be fine, but she does say, she says something like, I think I've let go of my fear. I think I'm not afraid anymore. And it is this moment of just like, okay, the tension has been released. She knows what, she doesn't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but she knows what is happening within herself.
Yeah. Yeah, there are definitely more gentle ways to have delivered that information, more thorough ways to do it, but yeah, it gives her something like now it's out there. Now she knows, and the doctor already has a plan for her, and just that knowledge, that's really what she needed. She just needed to know. And I think it's interesting because this could have gone a couple of different ways. This could have been, and what I think a lot of people probably expect is for this to end with, oh, by the way, you don't have cancer, everything's fine. And it doesn't do that. And it's also not this death sentence either. It's something kind of in the middle, like, yep, you do, you're sick, but also you're gonna be okay. And I really like that that's the ending that Varda chose, because it validates everything that Cleo's been experiencing and feeling through the whole movie. And it also gives this like realistic, like ending to this story. Instead of sort of this either sad, depressing one or this fairy tale ending.
Yeah, and I like what you say about it validating Cleo's experience, because she says a couple of times that she doesn't feel well, right? She's like, there's something wrong, definitely.
Yeah.
Right. And people are like, oh, it's in your head, or like, oh no, you just need a coffee, or I do like the guy at the cafe who's just like, no one should ever go to doctors because they find something wrong. So just like, I get you, guy in the cafe. I think that's a good perspective. And yeah, but it does, it says like, yes, what you were experiencing is actually something that you were experiencing. It's not something to be dismissed, but it's also not a death sentence. It's
Right.
also not, everything is over. And that, yeah, it's reality. And it also again relates to Antoine's experience, and the connection that they have formed is that Antoine's going to go to war and he might die, but he also might not. He might get to the front and the war's over, right?
Yeah.
And you don't know, but you can let go of the fear. I think that's part of it.
And this, I think, is the dang it, I lost another word. I feel like this kind of brings us full circle, because it calls us back to that opening tarot scene where the reader, one of the cards that comes up, the reader explains that this is not necessarily a literal death. I think it's the Hanged Man. That it means a profound transformation, which is what she's been experiencing for these 90 minutes, and it's also what she's going to continue to be experiencing over the next 2 months of her radiation treatment, and because of meeting Antoine, and this really is a turning point for her, where she is now forever going to be a different person.
And that's not bad necessarily. That's not necessarily something to fear.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great film, and I like the final shot is like just the two of them. I think it's the two of them looking at each other. And there's a lot of Varda started out as a photographer, and she is fascinated by the human face. We get a lot of just static shots of people's faces. And this shot isn't static, they're moving. But they kind of look at each other, and you get this moment of just this perfectly balanced frame. And not like, it's not uplifting necessarily, but it's like, it's okay. Like, whatever that means, it's okay.
Yeah. So any other thoughts, anything that we should have covered that we haven't?
I think it's a brilliant film. Like, it's I think it it's very lauded. I think it deserves even more attention. The fact that I too took a French film class and this wasn't shown.
What?
Yeah, at NYU.
What?
And we've talked a lot about female filmmakers and the way that female filmmakers kind of get sidelined. And I do think that happens a lot. Varda is this major point in the French New Wave, and we talk about Godard and Truffaut all the time. And she's kind of like, oh, and her too. And it's just like, well, not her too. She's doing something different than what they're doing. We need to actually look at her.
Yeah.
And it isn't, I think that there's still that attitude of like, it isn't just a woman's picture, right? Just like, well, it's about women, therefore we shouldn't really talk about it's a niche thing. And it's just like, no, this is not niche. This is like, we should be speaking about her with the same reverence and the same understanding and the same experience as any of these male filmmakers who are her contemporaries.
Yeah, definitely. It's great. It's on Criterion. If you have not seen it, or if it's been a while, watch it again. It's also just a beautiful film to look at. The costumes, the scenery, the images are so beautiful. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that we finally are talking about Varda. I'm so glad we finally talked about Cléo from 5 to 7. So thank you for indulging that one.
Yes. I'm excited about this. Like I say, I've watched. I'm probably she'll probably wind up being the filmmaker I've seen the most films of at the end of the year, with the ones that I've already watched and then the ones that we're doing.
Yeah, Criterion actually has a box set of it's the complete Varda collection. I don't know if it's actually 100% complete, but it's pretty darn complete. And there's some great stuff in there. So next Criterion sale, I'm just saying half off. Yeah, because it's a pricey set. It's like $200.
I was gonna say, like, those box sets where you do the complete, they have like the complete Fellini as well as like but that, like, oh, it's gonna go from 500 to 250. Oh
Yeah.
boy.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so next week we are going to be talking about Le Bonheur, happiness, which is from 1965. So it's her next film after Cleo, and yeah, just a couple years later. So so be on the lookout for that. And that's going to finish things up for this week. We are so happy that you have joined us. We're especially thankful to our patrons who help keep the show going. They're Abby, Audra, Brian, Connor, Estefania, Ferdinand, Heather, James, Judy, Carriata, Matt, Michelle, MK, Monty, Nanina, Noel, Robert, Stephen, Sharon. If you would like to join them and become a patron too, you can go to patreon.com/citizendame and sign up. And for the cost of a subscription, you get early episodes. You get them like 2 days early usually. And we also have bonus series and bonus episodes. Currently, we are working our way through the Alfred Hitchcock directed episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. So that's been a very fun project to go through. Yeah. There's other ways you can support us. We have our Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/citizendame. Also be sure to like us and give us ratings on whichever podcast place you listen to us. All of that helps us out. And we have our website, citizendamepod.com. We do have some written stuff there. I have a new review out this week, so be on the lookout for that. Yes, the new A24 film Friendship, which is so weird and so good. It's very funny. A young man, middle-aged man, is such a loser that he thinks Paul Rudd is the coolest guy on the planet.
Oh God.
No disrespect to Paul Rudd.
All disrespect to Paul Rudd.
No, it's actually it's cringe comedy that is so relatable. That's why it's so cringy, and it's great. It's very well done.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Anyway, but you can also reach out to us in other ways. We have our email, citizendamepod@gmail.com, and you can find us on social media. We are on Instagram and Blue Sky at Citizen Dame Pod, and we are Letterboxd HQ at Citizen Dame. You can also find us individually. Lauren, where are you?
I am on Instagram and Letterboxd at LH Business.
And I am on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd at Karen M. Peterson. That's it. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Bye.
Que recouvre la mer, mes plages se dévident, sans toi, sans toi. Belle en pure perte,